I don't really want to talk about the pandemic, but it's the reality, right? We've all kind of experienced this collectively. And I thought what was really interesting is how we attached, or like entertainment was that thing that kind of maybe helped us escape what was happening. I found it really difficult to read. I found that it took me maybe 3 or 4 times longer to get through a book.
Right.
But I could put on a movie and I just got lost. And so we were watching movies on our iPads, on our phones. Movie companies started like premiering movies on streaming services, which we thought would never happen, right? So I was been thinking about, like, is there a right way for us to watch a movie? How should we watch? How should someone watch a movie? Thom?
You know, I always watch a movie with the intent to feel, and I sort of put my critical side to the side, unless, of course, that's why I'm there at the film. But I let the film wash over me. And sometimes I think of it as the first viewing because as a critic and just as a film lover, I watch the same movie more than once, quite frequently. And if I don't like the film, I will definitely watch it again.
Really?
Yeah, just to see if I missed something.
Okay.
And so the way I watch a movie is I'm open to seeing what the filmmaker wants me to feel. I watch the movie to see if I'm being pushed to feel something or if it's coming organically. And
you don't want to be manipulated by...
Manipulation is the thing that'll throw me off a movie most, unless it's a specific genre of which I have expectations of being manipulated in a certain way, and then I can actually be disappointed.
Like a rom-com or something? Or
yeah, never a rom-com. Well, no, there's some great rom-coms, but it's not my go-to.
Yeah.
Horror films are very much like that for me. And if I'm going to watch a Scream or one of those, I expect certain things to happen. And if they don't, then I'm a bit disappointed. But if I'm going to watch something that is, let's say, Beau is Dead, and I know that it's a complicated film. I know that it takes liberties that other films don't. I don't try to understand it. I just sit there and go, okay, what am I feeling? And for me, that's the best way to sort of take a film in.
Alicia?
Yeah, it's hard to do this, but when I get a chance, I love going into a film not knowing anything. It's very rare now, but we're very lucky when we get to go to film festivals like the Toronto Film Festival that, you know, these are films that are being presented before a lot of critics have reviewed them, before there's a kind of zeitgeist about them. And I always think about, Cameron, you showed Moonlight a week before you showed it at the festival to staff, and I worked at TIFF at the time.
Right, yes.
I knew the short that the filmmaker had made, Barry Jenkins, didn't know him really well, but I got to watch Moonlight with nothing. Like, I didn't know what it was about. No one spoiled it for me. And then I remember watching it and sitting back at my desk, and no work got done that afternoon. But I thought, what is going to happen? Where is this film going to go? Like, and I don't think anyone could have predicted what would happen. But just being able to see something where you are going in cold is so wonderful and such a experience, because no one is telling you what to feel except for the film itself.
Well, we know it won an Oscar, but Cameron, I guess when I ask how should someone watch a movie, it could be like on a device or going to the theater. But I guess also from how you're watching it, like what Thom was saying, where you don't want to be manipulated, you just want to, if you're watching it as a fan of movies, but you're also watching it as a critic. So how do you watch movies?
You know, I think the technology doesn't matter so much. Movies are best watched, I think, in movie theaters, but you can also get into a movie on your laptop or on your phone or on a plane or in many different ways. So I'm not so worried about the technology. But I think what's most important is to watch a movie with curiosity. I think if you don't have curiosity, it's not going to work. You have to be curious. Like when you meet a new person, if you just are talking at them or they're talking at you and there's no curiosity back and forth about learning more about the other person, nothing's going to happen. There's no relationship. Same thing with movies.
Is it all for I don't want to get into genres because I want to talk about it, but do you watch all genres like that?
Yeah, I think every work of art, I think you have to, in a way, humble yourself before it, that it has something to teach you, right? You have to be curious about what it has to offer you, right? I think that's the best way to watch films. You know, when I'm disappointed in films, it's when there's nothing that meets my curiosity. It's entirely familiar, and I think there's a nice dance between the familiarity that movies offer you and the surprise that movies offer you. And ideally, you're somewhere in between, and you're kind of going back and forth in a dance. If it's entirely familiar and it's obvious, there's nothing for you.
Yeah. My habits of watching movies now has changed since the pandemic. Before, if I put on a film and I felt like, oh, this is not right for me, I would still watch a movie all the way to the end. Now, with all the streaming platforms, we've all, and I think the audience is so literate now around narrative and around film, that we've all put on films and think within a minute, oh man, I chose the wrong movie.
Thank you, next. Thank you, next, right? Yeah.
1 minute, yeah.
And so because I think we're all now ingested so much narrative that we understand, within a few minutes, like a minute, whether or not this is something for me, or this person, I'm in good hands, or this person has created mystery, suspense, tension, intrigue, wants me to kind of lean forward a little bit. And now my streaming feeds are like clogged up with films that I've started that I haven't finished, which I feel embarrassed about as a filmmaker, because back in the day, you go to the video store at Queen Video and you came home and you put on your DVD. You're gonna watch it. You're gonna watch that movie all the way
Otherwise, you're gonna get late charges.
You know what I mean? But now it's like, now there's a kind of sense of it's being disposable.
It's too much. And I think that's a really important point, actually. Movies used to be something that were rare, right? You would go on a Friday night or a Saturday night, and you couldn't see them in your house at all for decades of movies history, right? And you would have to go out to see them, and you would have to pay money and sit down with other people. And then, of course, that changed with home video. But even then, you had to go to the video store to get your VHS tape. And there was still some element of rarity to it.
And ritual too,
And
right?
you would wait for the release of new movies. And then, of course, DVDs and Blu-rays and now streaming. And now there are hundreds of thousands of movies available to us at our fingertips. And it's too much. We're never going to get through them all. But we feel like that choice is always going to be there for us. It's not, by the way, right? These things get taken away as soon as they're put out. And I think that's dangerous because it devalues the experience when you feel like you can watch anything, anytime.
One of the greatest things I like about going to the theater is the food.
It's a big part of the revenue stream too, so that's good.
Right? I know, it's like M&M's for $6.
Calling
no,
it
thank
food
you.
is generous.
I know, right? Maybe it's like an excuse to eat all the bad
nachos
foods.
now. And...
But Tom, do you think that's part of the experience, like going to the theater and the sound and being around people?
I love seeing a movie in a theater, and I love the reaction of audience members, particularly when they echo my own emotion.
Right.
And we were talking about feelings at one point, and that's what when I experience a movie and I feel it, and there's a moment going that's kind of universal. The community of theater goers is a tremendous experience. Now, to that point, there is a film, and I don't think I can name it because there's a twist in the movie, and I don't want to ruin it for anybody. It was at this year's festival. It was a sequel to a very popular movie. And the first, I would say, 10 minutes of this movie, it had a recognizable character who was not acting the way that character had acted previously. And it kind of put you off the film until the twist, when you realize what the twist happened. Now, at the theater, at the film festival, when this happened, the audience roared. They applauded. It was amazing. It was at one of the really big theaters, and they just erupted, and everyone felt great, and you're with the film for the rest of that movie. Now it gets on, about 2 weeks later, it gets on Netflix, and everyone says, oh, I turned it off 15 minutes in.
Yeah.
And I thought,
they ruin it with
you missed that
Well,
moment.
this is a great segue to, we have a clip of an audience reacting to a big battle scene in Avengers Endgame. Let's take a look.
Captain Sam, can you hear me? On your left.
I just remember being in the movies too, and at the end everybody claps, so you know that you had like a really cool experience. But if you're at home, you can't really have that experience. What do you think when you see a crowd react like that?
I showed Con Air a few weeks ago at the review, and this is an older film from 1997, and I think everyone in that audience had seen it once, twice, 3 times, 4 times. But to see and hear 250 people who all love this film just reacting to each other, and it was this communal kind of feeling of, it's a ridiculous movie, I'm not saying that it isn't, but it was bumping off of other people's feelings, and it just sort of created a situation that you could not replicate at home unless you had 200 people in your living room, which isn't gonna happen. And I just love that idea that whether it's a brand new film like Avengers or it's a film that we think is kind of tired and older, it can still elicit that kind of reaction because everyone feeds off one another.
Yeah.
I think some of my favorite memories of being at the movies are those collective responses, those kind of whoa moments, which reminds me of The Matrix, of course, because there's a literal whoa moment in it. But when, in the first fight scene in The Matrix, I remember watching it in a movie theater, when Trinity sort of jumps up and does the moves and the camera goes around like that. And it felt like we've never seen this before. And it was like being at the birth of the movies again. And that's exciting because it's not just what's happening, but how it's happening and what the director and all of the technicians are doing for you to thrill you, to give you something new visually. That's amazing whenever that happens. So many movies with twists, I think, are great to see. But when something is not just, the content of the thing, but how movie it is. Do you know what I mean? This is a moment that can't exist in literature or theater or any other art form. That's just exciting.
Yeah, but I mean, I think it's really a couple things, right? It's when you see a film that is innovative. The Matrix at that time was innovative. It added something new to cinema. Certain films want your reaction out of nostalgia, right? Which is like, we know what this means to you, so we're going to give you a sense of nostalgia. When I see a film like The Matrix, the last time that happened to me in a film was Fury Road by George Miller. When I saw the cars going across the desert in a sandstorm, I literally wept.
Yeah.
I wept. I'm like, this is going back to like 1922 cinema, pure cinema. Just like sound and image. And when you saw the guy on that, on the truck
shooting flames
up in the guitar, it was like, this is something new.
Fantastic.
And this is something new for cinema. So for me, it's really, you could have spectacle and nostalgia, or you could have innovation. You could sort of count the films throughout cinema history. You could say, Citizen Kane probably changed that. I would probably say, Godard in the 60s and New Wave did that. In the 90s, I think it's arguable to say that maybe Pulp Fiction did that. I think The Matrix did that.
I think of Spike Lee too. I think it was
Spike Lee
Do the
did
Right
that.
Thing, like
Do the
even
Right-
just the
yeah.
shot, that
Yes.
shot that he did where it
spike
felt
shot,
like
yes.
you were,
Yeah.
Thom?
Well, even if you think of The Godfather, at the very first opening scene, if I've ever had an opportunity to meet Coppola, I'd ask him this: why he or how he knew that first shot of an unknown actor with all those stars in that movie, and he just held the camera at that unknown actor talking to Brando. We don't even know who he's talking to. And what a fantastic opening for this picture. And it goes against everything you would think would work. And you were talking about openings earlier and about capturing an audience's emotion. That did it. And I think reactions like that can only happen with an audience. By the way, I watch movies at home by myself, and I'll applaud at the end if I really, really like it.
That's awesome.
And I also find just this conversation now, I'm really enjoying Cameron's response to what you're saying. It's like you talk about a moment and then you're going, yeah, right. And I'm thinking, Cameron thinks he's at a movie right now.
I love it. Well, Alicia, Clement just said something about nostalgia. And you said this, I don't know if you're going to remember this. This was like 2013, 10 years ago. You said, anything silent draws me in. Those aren't the films that are watched the most often, but are often the ones that need the most help. What do you take away from when you watch a silent film?
I take away how sophisticated they were. Like, I think I've fought a lot to dispel the kind of notion that it was an antiquated form of filmmaking, or, you know, it's primitive. Maybe some are, but when I was first introduced to silent film, I was blown away by those Mad Max Fury Road moments. Like, I love that you mentioned that's like a film from 1922. That's a compliment. And so that was like a new window into film for me. If we're talking about issues around diversity, which I know we'll talk about in a future panel, the silent era had it there. It's just we weren't promoting it. We weren't watching that particular niche of silent film.
Right.
So for me, it was an area of film history to advocate for. And when I show it in a large theater with 200 people and live music, I get those same reactions, those audience reactions. And I think there's a lot for new audiences that are coming to these silent films. It's surprise. But then they keep coming back. So there's something there in that era, and it's from 1895 to 1929, 1930. There's a lot there.
It's interesting because in our first panel, you said that when you were younger, you were like silent movies.
Oh,
no
the
way.
worst.
So, and now it's, you know, something that you're very passionate about. So what changed?
I'm not sure. I mean, I did lose my mother as a child, and so we always watched TVO. And that, I think, is a way to connect with her, and it was a way to connect with my grandmother. It was just sort of something that landed on my lap, and I don't think I had a choice. I always think back, like, when did I decide that I was going to be a silent film preservationist, historian, and curator? It was there. I'm not sure what happened, but it might just be I'd never seen anything like it before. And I'd seen the images of Charlie Chaplin and of Louise Brooks, and they stayed with me, but not the actual films. And then sitting down to watch those films, it was a whole world I had never seen before.
You said something that I want to ask all of you. I wanted to ask it in our first discussion, but we had so many things to talk about. You said that you don't think that you had a choice. Working in this industry, I mean, why movies? Thom, why do you work in this? What was it about it? Because you said at one point you thought that you would be a writer.
Yeah. And I like to think I am, actually. But, I never thought that a movie career in any way was open to me. I thought that I saw it as an ivory tower somewhere else in Hollywood, actually. To the point that if I went to a movie and they said Canada, somebody said Canada in the movie, I was just like, wow, they know we exist. So, you know, I was so lucky. I just never gave up on this love of cinema. And as I sort of chipped away at the blocks that were in my way, I found my way into film. Unlike everybody else here, I didn't have the opportunity to study film the way I would have liked to. So my studying film was just watching them, and reading about them. I read books about them. That I ended up in this, is really a blessing. It's an absolute blessing, but I couldn't tell you why. Every obstacle that you could put in my way was put there. I will say that, and I was telling Alicia this earlier in the green room, that when I was a younger man, I used to watch Elby Yost on Saturday night, the movies, and I worked Friday, Saturday, Sunday nights, overnights. And I would have to leave on Saturday at around 9:30, so I got to see the beginning. And I said to my girlfriend, now my wife, I said, all I want is a job where I can stay home Saturday nights and watch this. And then I ended up working on it. And so to me, it was, you know, I don't really say I believe in miracles, but this might be one.
Cameron, why movies?
I was a big reader as a kid, and language and literature were really my thing. That's what I studied at university. And but I took a film course in university that was called Contemporary Cinema. Started with Breathless by Jean-Luc Godard and went up through the 60s and 70s, everywhere but Hollywood. And that taught me that movies could do so much more than I thought they could do, which is just entertain and divert. And in fact, to go back to what you were saying about silent cinema, that's where I saw movies like The Passion of Joan of Arc and Sunrise, and movies that I think are among the purest expressions of cinema you can find, partly because they are silent. You know, they're using music, of course, but they're not using dialogue in the same way. And so just the visual sophistication of those films taught me that there was something beyond what I got from language and literature that I really loved as well. I loved the form, movement, design, composition, all of those elements that cinema gave me. And then I was just lost.
You were just lost. You know, Clement, you were born in Jamaica, right?
I was, yes.
I was born in East Africa, and coming in this country as an immigrant, there's certain things that you pursue, and there's certain things that you don't pursue. Journalism is not one of the things that you pursue. You become a lawyer or a doctor. You know, when it comes into the arts, there's this kind of pushback, like that's kind of like a hobby, or you'll never make it. So why movies for you?
You know, we're here at TVO, and you know, as a kid in Jamaica, I saw, you know, cinema from the third world. I saw sort of Hong Kong films with like Bruce Lee and Jimmy Wong Yu. I saw Italian spaghetti western films, the Django films, and so forth. But I saw Saturday night at the movies as a kid, and my sister bought me a VCR, and so I would tape movies off Saturday night at the movies. One of the very first films that I taped was a film called White Heat with Jimmy Cagney. And so, and for me, cinema, you know, maybe because I think in pictures, you know, cinema for me is just visual poetry, you know, sound and image. And you're talking about silent films. For me, the best cinema is about the silence, is about the visuals, is about the sound. You know, and that's what separates it from me now from like television, where a television now, which everyone seems to be talking about more than cinema in some ways. Well, television is more connected to plays. It's more connected to theater, where you know, people are in rooms talking for 3 minutes over a table or whatever it is, or in restaurants. Where in cinema, you can't explain why an image resonates with you. I think it connects more to kind of visual arts, you know. So I love the sort of the simple, you know, a Terrence Malick film, you know, or whoever it may be, you know, just a sense of the poetry that you get in cinema that you don't get in television.
It's why, you know, when I watch a TV series, and I can barely make it through most series, honestly, I can watch one or two episodes at the most. And when they do something cinematic, like they'll hold on a shot that's not just about the dialogue. And it's just, there's a visual moment in a TV series. It's kind of thrilling because it's so rare.
It's so rare.
You know, you don't see it that often.
You don't see it. Yeah.
And then you always look up who's behind this series, and
right.
it's a famous
It's a
director.
filmmaker.
That makes sense.
Of course.
I just want to make, like, you know, it's so interesting and it's so cool that you both connected. You're from like different parts of the world, and this show on TVO connected you both. That's really cool. I
But
just thought I'd
clearly he
mention it.
didn't see that this film will not be copied.
I didn't see it, and I did. You know, it was Magic Shadows and Saturday Night at the Movies, and you know, and just the sense of poetry and art and expression, you know, and sometimes an image connects with you and you don't know why. You know, why do I feel this way? And that to me is cinema.
Yeah. Alicia?
How much, can I ask Clement, how much was it perhaps also that someone was hosting it? They were introducing the film, there was a personal touch. It felt like you were in a conversation more than just taping a movie, you know, off of a random channel. For me, it really was, I knew who this Elwee Yost person was. He was part of my family life, even though I was young and didn't really know him. It was so important for Saturday Night at the Movies that it had that active curation.
Absolutely, he was our guy. He was my guide to films that I didn't know, you know.
And trust is built.
Trusted, yeah. There's a sense of, oh, you should watch a Stanley Kramer film because he made social justice movies, right? And so Elwee Yost would sort of guide you through that. This is what film noir is.
Yeah.
You know, look for the shadows, look for the way, you know, post-war America, how after the war cinema changed. So you needed that guide, and he was the perfect guide to
Yeah.
help me through that.
And Tom, you were clapping. Obviously, hearing
Oh,
this,
yes,
hearing this
because,
means what to
yeah.
you?
Well, I always thought that someone introducing a film was added so much more. There were movies that I disliked that were very popular, and two of them, The Sting and Butch Cassidy, I just never got why. And then I heard Elway introduce them, and then by this time I was working with him, so I had to do the research too. And when you get behind the films and you understand how they were brought together, what the intent was, it really adds so much. And I would not just say the host of someone or someone to lead you through those films, of which I got to do a number of years here, and still count my blessings for that. I would also say that's why I read critics, film critics, and particularly if I see a film that I love that nobody else seems to, which happens quite a bit, I love going to the critics that didn't like the film and find out what their take is. And usually they're not wrong. I would never say they were wrong. I just thought, okay, I saw that too, but it affected me differently. So yeah, I'm so glad you said that, because I do think that the art of introducing a film and leading someone through a film and just sharing your passion for movies.
They're gonna.
Well, this has been a terrific conversation. It doesn't feel like work. I feel really privileged to spend this time with you all. Tomorrow we're going to talk about the things that are shaking up the movie industry, from AI to streaming. We'll continue this conversation. Thanks again. Thank you.
The Agenda in the Summer with Nam Kiwanuka is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.